Good morning, everyone. So, me cambio, me recuerdas. So today we have a special guest, but before that, I was telling this in my stories, in my Instagram stories this morning, that the majority of agents, when they hear that there is a commercial training available, they doesn't show up. Why? Because they say, no, I'm not like the commercial expert, so I don't want to learn anything about that. But when they receive an opportunity to work with a commercial client, they just make a referral agreement, but they expect to receive 30% referral when they can't participate in any of the transaction because of the lack of experience. So congratulations for yourself, because today you are here. So and the other thing that I want to say is the commitment, the importance of the commitment. Today, as you know, it's our 5th anniversary. Okay. So it's the perfect excuse to be in a hotel or in the beach, but today we are here because training day is Tuesday. So that day you can put a closing, the anniversary celebration, anything, because we need to be here learning. Okay. So remember that the next time that you want to do any other thing on a Tuesday. Okay, so today we have this very special guest, Perla Calas. Please help me to welcome her.
Thank you. My pleasure. I know that today you expected Amber as well. April Fools. I wore a little green in tribute to Apple Tower because this presentation actually is something that Amber from Apple Tower and I have worked on, because we do want to make sure that residential agents have at least some idea of how the commercial contract works. So I want you to think about this little class in particular, not as everything there is to know in the commercial world. No, this is for residential agents to understand the standard commercial contract, right? A little bit more. So that if the opportunity does come up, Jimena said, right? Your cousin's brother's next door neighbor happens to have a transaction and they bring you in on it, or you know that someone's looking for something, you at least have or been exposed to the vocabulary, the terminology, and more than anything, where the differences are between the residential that you know and love and this particular contract. Okay, so let's jump right into it. There we go. So my favorite part, we are not providing legal advice, right? That's the big disclaimer. We are here as a conversation, as a discussion about the commercial contract. Legal advice comes about when the client retains us, we look at a particular set of facts and we interpret the law based on those facts. Okay? So when we are going to actually cover these items, when does a commercial contract come into play? Review of the terms, what to include, what not to include, why the check boxes are different, right, than there is in residential. Clauses that require special attention. Contingencies that come into play in a commercial contract that don't really come into play in a residential contract. And some final thoughts. Okay. So, how do we know when we need a commercial contract? Right? Because there are some properties that you may think, well, this is a residential property, right? People live here. Why can't I use the residential contract? Well, as a general rule, if it has more than 4 units, residential units, live units, it's considered commercial. Obviously, if somebody's selling a standalone bakery, you know that's commercial, right? But sometimes your client is a mom and pop, and they have what they consider a small multifamily in East Miami-Dade. And it has 5 units, not 4. Now we're talking commercial contract, right? If you guys are doing a duplex, you would know, hey, I can use the residential contract, right? Once you hit that 5-unit threshold, it becomes commercial. Always look at the property appraiser's designation if you have any doubts. Heads up for the residential. If you think you're involved in a 5-unit and you look up the county and it says it's not, look into that, right? That's a little heads up for your buyer. Maybe what they're buying isn't what is actually permitted to be there. Okay. Notice duplexes. Notice the land use is 2 to 9 units. This is actually a zoning designation. So you could have 2 units. That would be a straight residential contract. They don't distinguish. They don't change it when it gets to 9. It's still commercial once you hit the 4 units. Okay, so think of it that way. These are examples of commercial. Number 1, vacant land. Although there is a specific vacant land contract in the FAR library, right? There's one just for vacant land. If it has mixed use, department stores, supermarkets, shopping centers, office buildings. Sometimes you have a little standalone office building, or it could be an office condo. I have more and more residential agents that sometimes are presented the opportunity with somebody's office condo. We have professional services building. Trust me, if you get into selling an airport, we're talking a different category there. That's something else I want to say. When we're talking about the actual contract, we're talking about the standard FAR commercial contract. But do not be surprised if the contract that you are presented with is not the standard contract. Okay, something very important to keep in mind. While 99% of the real estate transactions that are residential occur with the FAR bar or the FAR contract for residential, commercial doesn't always use the standard contract. So I want to make sure you guys are aware of that. You may be confronted with a different form. We're going to talk about that. So let's talk about the process. In a residential, normally you see the property, you present the offer on the standard residential contract. Most commercial transactions actually start with a letter of intent. So the offers, right, come in as a letter of intent. In the letter of intent, it's just talking about points: price, deposit, financing, due diligence, closing period. Why don't we just present the standard contract? Because commercial tends to have many variables that in a residential we do not always encounter. Okay, so in the letter of intent, it is an opportunity for the parties to see if they're at least on the same playing field, right? Because if I'm coming in thinking I'm playing soccer and I show up and it's a baseball field, the letter of intent gets you to that point. Normally, the letter of intent is not binding. It's very important that it be looked at carefully. But it does review those standard contracts, those standard clauses, right? Let's talk about the highlight. Let's talk about the high points. Are we in the same ballpark on price? Are we in the same ballpark on due diligence? Right? Like I said, it's normally not binding unless there's language in the letter of intent that makes it binding. If you encounter a letter of intent that has any language about being binding, this is where you really should start consulting a real estate attorney. Because as long as nothing is binding, you're good. But once someone is being bound to terms that are going to survive that letter of intent, that's where you as agents cannot give legal advice as to whether your client should enter into that relationship. Right? Keep that in mind. When it comes to commercial, due diligence is not just an inspection of the property. That's why in the letter of intent, you actually start talking about what the use of the property is going to be. You could have financial issues. You could have zoning issues. For example, I'm going to buy a building that is currently an attorney's office, but I want to put a dry cleaner. I want to put a school. I want to put a daycare. I want to put an ALF. The use of that property isn't assumed. Also, we are seeing many cases now in the city of Miami where the property was being used for X, but the city's new 2020 plan or 2030 plan has a different use for it. So just because what you see there is an office doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be able to use it as an office once it sells. That is what goes into a due diligence in a commercial contract. With residential, it's a house and you're living there, probably keep living there, right? You can't make that assumption in commercial. And this is what I mentioned earlier. There is a standard commercial contract that you as agents can use. But in the commercial world, there is no standard because a lot of times attorneys get involved. And they may get involved early on. The seller may want to use the same contract that they used when they bought, for example. This is just a reminder that you as agents, under the law, are allowed to use the contract that your broker provides through the forms library. Once it's another form, that's when you have to bring an attorney to the table. Because you are not, under the law, allowed to use or fill out a contract that's not one that's been approved by FAR. Okay, so I hate to sound that way, but I want to make sure you guys are staying in your lane and you're not opening yourself up to potential claims. Okay. Again, agents may only prepare the standard. Otherwise, it must be done by an attorney. So, what are we including? We are talking about the standard FAR commercial contract, okay? Legal description. I know you guys just kind of always go to the legal description that's populated by the property appraiser's office. In commercial, it makes a huge difference because in commercial, I, the owner, may own this entire parcel, right? But that actually may be 3 different parcels, according to the property appraiser's office. And you see my building, but what I'm selling you is the parking lot. Or it may have 3 buildings on it. You need to make sure you are defining what the commercial contract is going to cover. Do not assume it is the entire parcel or the entire thing that you see. Legally, it may be 3 separate parcels, and each one can be sold individually. Okay? Keep that in mind. One way is to look and see the folio numbers. If you're only including one folio. If there's more than one, include all the folio numbers. We have seen many disputes in commercial where the buyer thought, this is a great deal. I'm paying $1 million for all of this. And the seller's like, no, well, you're buying this for $1 million. Got it? So it's important to define that upfront. Make sure your addresses are consistent, especially if you're using addresses in the contract. There may be 3 folios, but there's only 1 business on there now, so there's only 1 physical address. Okay, so that's important to define early on. Do not confuse address, mailing address, physical address, and folio. Are we clear? I don't want to make you guys crazy. In commercial, it's very important to define your personal property. In the residential contract, you have like a standard language that these things are included, and then you have to add your washer dryer because we all know that they put that out. In commercial, it's very important to include what is actually included in that transaction. Sometimes it's just the real estate. Sometimes I'm going to buy the desks, the software, whatever is located in the place. Sometimes it's forklifts, right? If I'm buying a warehouse and there's forklifts there, establish that early on. You do not want to have a battle over a $40,000 forklift. Racks. I have had many cases whether the racks that are installed are included with the property. Air conditioners. Those are not assumed to be part of the property. So you need to make sure that you define what is being sold with the property. If it's important to your client, it's important to write down. Again, when equipment, machinery, or any other personal property is included, make sure to expressly include it. If it's things that have to do with serial numbers, put those in. Or you can always say the parties are to exchange a list of equipment within 5 days. Listing, make sure it's during the due diligence period if something is left out. And define it with serial numbers. We had a situation where people were coming to blows at a bakery over an oven, because the oven that they saw when they got there was not the oven that was there at closing. So if it's important equipment to your client, it should be written down and identified. We're no longer talking about a $1,000 dishwasher, $1,000 clothes, where sometimes I've seen agents go, you know what, take it from my commission, let's just get this done. We're talking $40, $50, $80, $100,000 of equipment that's necessary for the operation of a business. Okay? So, purchase price. Very simple, right? You want to make sure you're defining your deposit. Do not be surprised if somebody requires that it be held with an attorney. I do want to point out that in the commercial contract, they end up with a bunch of different deposits, right? Because sometimes it is structured depending on the milestones of the contract, okay? So you have an initial deposit to get into contract. Then you may have another deposit at the end of due diligence. You would have another deposit at the end of the financing period. Or let's say that this particular purchase, a franchise agreement has to be signed. Well, there may be another deposit once the franchise approves you. Things like that will factor into the number of deposits that are done. It doesn't apply in every transaction, but I want you to understand the contract already contemplates that. Okay? We have a deposit, an additional deposit, and an additional deposit. Just like I do in the residential contracts, I just want to mention to please keep in mind all of the dates. If you're financing, let's say there's an additional deposit due at the close of financing, don't make it due the same day. Give yourself a few days. If there's another deposit due at the end of due diligence, don't do it the same day. Give yourself a couple of days. Give your client that wiggle room. And as a seller's attorney or a seller's agent, understand that these are milestones, right, that are going to happen. If that buyer is not going to go through with the contract, the point here isn't to keep a deposit. The point here is to get a sale done. So make it reasonable. Okay, you're not selling a house. You're selling a commercial property. Your due diligence is not going to be 7 days. Likely never going to be less than 30 days. Okay, already have that night and prepare your seller for that. Especially if your seller has never sold anything but house. They're going to expect the same things. This is where you need to educate that seller. So, all of this, right? Financing, other, it's really good. Okay? All deposits will be credited to the purchase price. So, just remind your buyer, guess what? We're going to space out your deposit this way. One of the things I wanted to point out is this favorite language here. This is the same in residential. Time is of the essence. That means deadlines are deadlines. I'm Latin. 80% of my clients are Latin. I almost feel like to my clients, deadlines are like a pirate code, right? They're more like guidelines. No. If your deadline is 30 days, your deadline is 30 days. If your deadline is 10 days, your deadline is 10 days. And one of the things that's very significant, okay, is that there used to be a provision, I think I put it in here somewhere, where, well, time of acceptance counteroffer is 3 days, but how is it calculated? Time periods ending on a weekend or national legal holiday will extend to the following next business day, except acceptance and effective date. So your effective date can be on a Sunday. Your effective date can be on a Saturday. The old version of this contract said that all days less than 5 days were based on business days. That's no longer the case. They've changed it to be calendar days. So count your days. Now, if that last day lands on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, then it moves over to the next day, the next business day. And it no longer has a cutoff of 5 p.m., which the old version used to have. Now they still expect us all to work 24/7. So I bring that up in case you were familiar with the old commercial contract and the times that were calculated there. I want you to think, time is of the essence. Train your clients on this language. Train them from the beginning. Deadlines are deadlines. Only when it lands on a weekend or national legal holiday will it extend anymore. And it's only to the next business day. I had someone try to argue to me that when Christmas landed on a Thursday, that Friday was a holiday because nobody worked. No. And the Friday after Thanksgiving, I got that argument too. So, closing date and location. The closing will take place where the property is located unless you write something else. I know this doesn't seem like a big deal, but it actually can be a big deal. When you're buying, for example, your client is in Broward, but they're buying a commercial property in Orlando. They don't want to travel up there for that. Or they don't necessarily agree to do it all electronic, although the contract now provides for it. I only say this because I keep running across people who haven't done a closing since before the year 2000 that are now finally retiring. And they're like, what do you mean we're all not going to be around the same table? I don't understand how this works. So educate your clients early on, okay? The closing may be conducted in any county, regardless of where the county the property is located. And it does say that it can be conducted by mail or electronic means. Okay? So, third-party financing. I'm not going to go into financing any more than to say residential financing and commercial financing are two different animals. Do not think that your timeframes are going to be the same. Generally, commercial financing can take 45, 60 days easily. There are things called environmental assessments that sometimes have to be done, a phase 1. And if there's any issue with the phase 1, you may have to do a phase 2. A commercial appraisal, a lot more expensive than a residential appraisal. And they sometimes have to take into account the highest and best use of the property. So they have to take into account things like rent rules. What is the cap rate on the property? It goes into a lot more depth than a residential appraisal. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your time frame. Notice how the default time frame is 45 days. It's already longer than the one that appears in the residential contract. And that may not be realistic if your client, your buyer, hasn't already started working with a lender prior to entering into the contract. Okay? Make sure that your buyer and you are working hand in hand with that lender from the moment the contract is signed and before. Already covered that. Something that's a little different. Did I not put it on? Why isn't it coming up here? Hey man, I use it. What did I do? I mean, I'll say it, but like it's showing up here, but it's not showing up here. I don't know what I did. See? Doing an April Fool's on me.
We start to say that either structure is what you're getting into, then chairs and everything else has to do. So it's just a structure,
The real estate,
structure.
the dirt. There we go. Okay, what I wanted to point out, which is different from the residential contract. You have a loan approval date. Right? In the commercial contract, the buyer has 3 days after the loan approval date to decide if they want to cancel or not. In the residential contracts, they have to make a decision by the loan approval date. So just understand that while that date is hard, the buyer can decide in 3 days, decide if they want to go forward anyway and waive the financing contingency. Okay, so understand that provision is there. What am I doing? Hold on, I'll get it. There we go. Got it. Okay. Now I look like Amber. I wish. So super important. In title, seller has the legal capacity to transfer title, right? That's what you're warranting in the contract. In residential, we almost always just see your standard warranty deeds. In commercial, and sometimes a special warranty deed. In commercial, we've seen different types, so I want to make sure you guys understand the difference. A statutory warranty deed just says, I own the property, I am transferring it to you, and I guarantee that title. I will defend that title against anybody else that comes to claim against that title. That's what a warranty deed means. Then we have a special warranty deed. Special. Special means I own the property, I'm transferring it to you, but I only guarantee the title for things that I may have created on the property. I'm not guaranteeing what people before me may have done to the property. Okay, I'm only guaranteeing that I didn't do anything to mess up the title. In commercial, actually in residential, we see these with flips, bank REOs, because the bank's like, look, I'm not responsible for what the last guy did. I'm just telling you that while I was the owner, I didn't do anything and nobody can claim through me. In commercial, we see a lot of these. And so just be prepared. And I want you just to understand the definitions. Technically, grantor hereby commence covenants and warrants and defend the title to the land hereby conveyed from any and all lawful claims which arise by, through, or under grantor, but none other. See the difference? And then, of course, we have the dreaded preclusion. I hate these. I think they're horrible. Because, of course, the seller isn't warranting anything. They're not even saying that they're the actual owners of the property. So if you ever come across a transaction where someone is trying to sell, or your seller says, I'm just going to give a quick clean, be highly suspicious. Let all the little red flags go off and run to your broker and go, this is what's happening. And then hopefully she'll call me next, or any real estate attorney. Do not go into those transactions thinking it's okay. So this is a part of the contract that I will admit is horribly written. And it's very confusing, especially to residential agents. Because we're used to the residential contract. It's very clear, right? It's either seller pays, buyer pays, or seller pays the report, buyer pays for title, and whoever pays for title picks the closing agent, right? That's how this is, but the wording is just, you'll see. So, evidence of title. The party who pays the premium for title insurance will select the closing agent. Seems pretty easy, right? And pay for title search and closing services. So think of it that third little category in the residential contract doesn't exist, right? If the buyer is paying for title, they pay for all the reports, they pay for the premium. If the seller is paying for title, they pay the reports, they pay the premium. Got it? That third little paragraph doesn't exist. And then it says seller will. And you're like going, wait a minute. If the seller isn't the person, then why does it start with seller will? Seller will at seller's expense or buyer's expense. Here is where you pick who is paying for title. Think of it that way. Okay? At seller's expense or buyer's expense. Whoever pays is selecting the closing agent, will pay for the title search and the closing services associated with that title. Now, if the buyer is getting a loan, the buyer is still going to pay for the title insurance premium and all the services associated with that loan. Okay, that has not changed. The seller would pay for the owner's policy. The buyer would pay for the lender's policy. Okay? Now, the seller is going to deliver, at buyer's expense maybe, a title commitment or an abstract of title. Have any of you ever seen an abstract of title? I have, because I'm old, but an abstract of title is literally, it could be this deep, it's copies of all the prior documents in title. We don't use that anymore. It's still part of the contract because I can only envision there are still some counties somewhere in Florida that maybe rely on that. But what everybody delivers is a commitment, because then later that commitment becomes the policy. Okay? Why does it say that the seller is going to deliver, but the buyer's paying for it? Right? That's why I don't like the way this is worded. But the reason is, and very technically, because in the end, the seller is the one that's making the representation to the buyer of clean title. So that's why the contract uses the terms of deliver. The seller is on the hook to deliver the evidence of title, to make sure that they really are the owner and they really can sell this property. See, very nuanced thing. Costs. I just want to highlight this. The buyer will pay buyer's attorney's fees, taxes, and recording on the note, mortgage, financing, and recording fees for the deed. Seller will pay seller's attorney's fees, taxes on the deed, We're gonna talk about this in a second. And recording fees for documents needed to cure title defects. A heads up. Broward, a seller pays documentary stamps on the deed. We know this, right? That's standard. Miami-Dade has something called a surtax on commercial property, actually, on anything more than a single family residential home. So I want you to be aware of that, because sometimes you're talking to your seller and you mention the doc stamps, but you don't mention the surtax, which is 0.0045 of the sales price. And the seller is obligated to discharge any encumbrances that are found on that commitment. So let's talk about the due diligence. First, you can do an as is. Notice how the as is just says that the buyer's already looked at the property and they take it. It's not like the residential as is that says you're taking it as is, but you have this time to inspect and then you can cancel. No, here you're waiving your right to inspect if you mark as is. B, due diligence. The buyer is going to inspect, right? But notice how they don't talk about the word inspection. They talk about due diligence. Because it is not just an inspection of the physical property. The buyer is going to look at zoning, environmental, land use, capacity, construction, permits, licenses for operation. What if I want to open a restaurant that requires a liquor license? Is that allowed under the zoning? Is there going to be capacity for the liquor license? Am I going to be able to get the license I need to operate at this location? An example is getting a zoning letter. A zoning letter from the municipality or the county is what tells your client legally what the zoning is for that property and the uses that can be done. It costs something like $100, $150, I think. It takes 30 days to get. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about due diligence. Yes, you're going to have an inspector out there and you're going to have them look and see if there's leaks and to see if the property itself is sound. That is 25% of the issue. The rest is, can my client do with that property what my client wants to do with that property? We had a situation with a client, a vacant land. He bought from a nonprofit that had had the land for a number of time. And the property actually had endangered forest species on the property in South Dade. He was going to buy this property thinking he was going to build about 30 homes. He got to build 18. So all that goes into that due diligence period. Okay. This just kind of gives you an idea. Oh, ADA. ADA is huge right now. I recommend all my clients that are buying a commercial property to have an ADA inspection as part of the due diligence. Because they have testers that come and say, oh, guess what? Your door is 1 inch too small. Here's a federal lawsuit. The passageway between this hallway and this hallway, too small. The toilet paper holders in the bathroom are not at the right height. Federal lawsuit. All that falls under the ADA. So those are the type of due diligence inquiries that we're talking about. Again, use. What type of business? Parking. Parking is huge because parking can make or break a business. You have a doctor's office that only has 3 spots to park. That doctor cannot survive at that location. This is the type of analysis that goes into the commercial contract. I'm sorry, am I taking too long? I'll go back. Signs. Oh my gosh, signs. I had a beauty salon for men. Beautiful. They wanted a spot in downtown Miami. They found a condo. They were going to buy this to put up the signs. They thought, this is great. We're going to put it here. We're going to put it here. We're going to put it here. We're going to be able to see it. During due diligence, the association, which is a commercial association, says, oh, we only allow signs on the front. It can only be this big and these colors. But wait a minute, I'm buying a corner unit. I'm buying the corner unit because there's a blank wall. And I want to hire some muralist to come and put a mural about the beautiful things I'm going to do in this spa. This is why I'm buying the corner unit and I'm spending a lot more money. Yeah, no, we don't allow that. If people can't find you, people aren't going to use you. So signs are huge. Environmental certification. This is where you have to tell your client, be realistic, do the due diligence, go to the city, go to the county, sit with their people, tell them what you want to do. Are they going to let you do it? Those people in the cities and counties are great. They will tell you exactly what you can do, but you're not going to get an appointment with them in a day, and you're not going to get an appointment with them in a week. So you have to allow time for that investigation. And be realistic with your clients about now and in the future. You're buying this place now. You need one parking spot because you're brand new and you have nobody working with you. Where are your employees going to park? Where are your clients going to park? What is your expectation of this property a year from now, 5 years from now? Get the business and occupational license application up front. Look and see what they're asking for. And especially if your business type was not at that location before, that investigation has to be even deeper. Okay? So, real quick, and this is something that I just want to point out to you guys. Notices. I just have to remind you about this because I just had a case come across my desk from an agent. Notices that are given to the party's attorney or agent are deemed notices to the party. We had an agent that went on vacation. Nobody was monitoring that agent's email. A notice of cancellation came in. The seller said, I want to go after this person's deposit. And the agent's like, yep, it's too late. They can't get out of it anymore. When I start seeing what's there, they gave notice to the agent during the inspection period that they were canceling. The agent didn't see it until they got the reminder like a week later. So that seller turned and looked at the agent. Went, so all of this could have been avoided. I say this to you because that's what the contract says. And notice it doesn't say unless the party's on vacation or unless the party didn't have internet service or unless the party was busy with something else. Notices to you as agents is legal notice to your clients. Sorry, that's my attorney soapbox for the day. And so to protect yourselves, the moment you receive any type of notice, You must immediately transmit it to your client in writing. Keep that as your evidence. Copy your broker if you want, because that's what's going to save you later. You got the notice, you immediately sent it to your client. Got it? Time and date of the notice is when the agent receives it. And just a reminder to monitor your email or have somebody monitor your business email. That's right, your business email, personal emails, different emails. Also, same with your office address. Do not assume that the notice is coming by email. If you post that your office address is this address, and there's no one here for the week because, I don't know, it's Christmas, y'all closed. Notice that comes here is notice even if no one sees it. Whatever your office address is. Okay? You can also say the same thing for your clients. Make sure they know that notice does not have to come by email. It can come by FedEx, it can come by mail, it can come any way they can get it to you. Optional clauses, really quick. Notice a lot less riders, right? than there are in the residential contract. Mostly, it's envisioned that in a lot of these commercial contracts, an attorney does get involved at some point and comes up with maybe sometimes a custom rider. Don't be afraid if you see that, but you do need to get an attorney involved if the other side sends you. Things we don't see here. Condo. Notice the lack of condo rider. Worst comes to worst, use the condo rider from the residential. Because guess what? There's still disclosures that have to be given, even if it's a commercial condo. Okay? It's not the same, but you want to make sure that buyer is aware of this. Estoppel letters aren't mentioned in the contract. So hash that out. Who's paying for that? How is that given? When does the buyer have to apply for approval of a condo? None of that is standard in the commercial contract. Oh, flips. I don't know why I'm seeing a lot of commercial flips. Little practice pointer. Always include a contingency regarding the sale being subject to obtaining title if your client is the dolphin, the flipper in the process. Also, there's no obligations anywhere for the seller to clear up things from the lien search, like open permits, right? Code violations, citations. As long as they're civil, they're not a title defect. The contract only talks about liens under title. Those may not have matured to liens yet. Guess what? The septic tank disclosure from Miami-Dade still required. Signatures. Real quick, because I think I'm running behind time. Like I did in the residential, just make sure that whoever's signing the contract really has legal authority to sign the contract. Look them up in Sunbiz. Whether it's your client, you think it's your client, or the other side, right? You want to make sure your contracts are enforceable. So make sure whoever's signing is the person that has authority to sign. Sometimes it's a Delaware entity. Remember, you can't see Delaware entities online. You can't see Nevada entities online. You can't see Wyoming entities online. Ask for the company paperwork. Say, I need assurance that the president is signing, the manager is signing, the member is signing. If they don't have it for the contract, may not get it for the closing. And final thoughts. So, what is my mantra that I want you to repeat every night before you go to sleep? Know your property, know your client, know your contract, right? Because it's going to vary every single time, but the mantra stays the same whether it's commercial or residential. If it is not the standard contract, if anybody got creative, if there's a different rider or a different contract, you need to get an attorney involved. The law does not allow you to exercise over non-approved ones. Do not interpret, read, or give advice on the contract. That's where you guys get in trouble. And please do not get creative with preparing your own addendas or riders. Just don't. I know nowadays we're getting used to dealing with residentials in the $600 million. And God bless all of you. Hopefully you get multi-million-dollar residentials. In commercial, the damages are higher because the damages take into account future earnings, losses, and appreciation. So do not delve into the custom addendas that might cause your client literally exponential damages. Do not be everything to your client. You are not a CPA. God knows you are not an ADA inspector. Okay. You're not a zoning expert, a construction expert. Do not say, sure, you can put a restaurant here. Oh, liquor license, and we used to party all the time. Yeah, check out the zoning, see if that's still allowed. Maybe that's why it's not there now. Okay, make sure your client is hiring the professional that they need to decide whether this is the property for them. Use the due diligence period as thoroughly as possible. Tell your client, conduct every inspection you can think of. Speak to everybody under the sun. Because once that's over, the contract is hard. Okay? And include any additional contingencies. Like if you want to have a daycare center, right? There's a space in there too. This is contingent on me being able to do a daycare center. That's not allowed everywhere. If there is a special assessment, please make sure it's disclosed. Again, there's no standard condo rider. We sometimes default to the residential rider, but the condo terms still have to be disclosed. And Apple Tower should always be your closing agent. Green. Any questions? I know I went through it kind of quick because I think we're running behind time, right? Guys, I hope you call me with a huge commercial contract and we're able to help you. So thank you. And April Fools. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. No, anytime, anytime.
Thank
Bye,
you.
bye.
Thank you, Perla.
You're welcome.
Ya me escuchas, todo tuyo.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Chicos de Zoom, ya los voy a conectar por el otro Zoom para la presentación del proyecto de Orlando.